Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation today. Got some sound bites I'd like to pray for you with regard to the sanctity of marriage, the debate over sodomy-based marriage at the Supreme Court. And Rob, I think we'll probably start with clip 4, start working our way there. Now, I think one of the issues I want to stress as we begin to kind of reflect on this issue is that we never, ever should forsake the moral argument. Now, I've heard a number of people that are friends and colleagues in the pro-family movement who say, you know, when I'm talking to believers, when I'm talking in a church setting or wherever, I will refer to the teaching of Scripture. But when I'm debating this, like on the Senate floor or in some kind of a public forum, I refer to social science. Now, my reaction to this is twofold. Number one, that might be a good strategy to leave God and the Bible and the Judeo-Christian tradition out of the conversation if, depending on social science, actually worked, if it did any good. But what you find is when you refer to the research that comes from social science, they reject it anyway. They'll find some flimsy excuse to deny the validity of the social research that you're bringing forward. I have used the information from the Mark Regnerus study at the University of Texas at Austin repeatedly. And I've used it in many debates, in media situations, in interviews with hostile folks that are hostile toward natural marriage. And I've never found a single liberal who has said, oh, well, that changes my mind. I am so glad you brought up that social research. I have enormous respect for the University of Texas. He's a well-respected sociologist. His research has been cleared by their Office of Research Integrity. You know, you've just changed my mind, Brian. I cannot thank you enough for bringing that social science to my attention. So my point is, look, if it worked, there might be one reason to leave God and the Bible out of the public debate. But my argument is that is actually the strongest argument we have. The most profound argument that we have to defend natural marriage is that it is God's design. Now, if you understand what God has said about any subject, that trumps everybody else. God's wisdom trumps man's wisdom every time. And it does so in every circumstance. There is no reason for us not to make the moral argument for natural marriage and make the moral argument against the normalization of homosexuality every time we're having that conversation. Now, it doesn't have to be the only thing. I'm not saying that the only thing that we ought to do is thump our Bibles like Bill O'Reilly said. We should use social research. We should use information from the CDC and the FDA, and I try to be as prepared with as much information as I can possibly bring to the discussion. But I am not going to yield on this foundational principle that marriage has been defined by God. It is an institution that was designed by God, created by God, and defined by God, and that what God has defined, man must not redefine. So I don't think we ought to retreat from that position. I don't think we ought to be embarrassed by it. I don't think we ought to apologize for it. I think we ought to forthrightly and boldly declare that what God has defined, man may not redefine. And whatever the setting is, doesn't matter whether it's on the floor of a legislature, in a committee hearing, in a private conversation, on a media interview, that's always the place that we start, and it's the strongest place on which to stand. That's how I started off my interview on the BBC last week. First thing I said about gay marriage, what God has defined marriage as union of one man and one woman, and what God has defined, man may not redefine. Now, I went on to talk about Mark Regnerus' study and all that kind of thing, and talk about the health risks associated with homosexual behavior. And we ought to use all the information that's at our disposal, but we should not give up that's our trump card. You know, we just read in Jeremiah, every man is stupid and without knowledge before God. And so it simply makes sense if we understand what God has said, if we know what God has said on a topic, then his wisdom, his perspective, it trumps man's wisdom in every setting, in every conversation, in every media outlet, in every public policy venue. And we should not back away from taking our stand on the revealed word of God and the truth of God in any way, shape, or form. Now, some people try to make the argument against homosexual marriage, and I've seen some very good efforts to do this, leaving the morality of sexual behavior out of the conversation altogether. They will just make the argument without referring to morality in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they'll sort of take pride in the fact that they are defending natural marriage without making a moral argument, without talking about the morality or immorality of homosexual behavior. And I think this is a big mistake. This is a gross mistake. And partly because it is immoral behavior. And we shouldn't have any hesitation in saying that. We ought to have no qualms about declaring that it is immoral, sinful behavior. How do we know that? Because we have God's perspective. We have God's counsel. We have God's wisdom. And that trumps man's wisdom. It does not matter what man says about homosexual conduct. We know that it is sinful and immoral behavior because God has revealed that to us in his word and has revealed it to us in nature. The laws of nature make it clear that that's not the sexual use for which the human body was designed. Even if you believed in evolution, you'd have to say, nah, evolution didn't design the human body for that. And if you believe in creation and God as I do, then very clearly God did not design the human body for that. It's just simply a matter of plumbing. So we should have no hesitation about making the moral argument. In fact, if you listen to our opponents in the culture war, they are always, always, always arguing morality, aren't they? They're always talking about equality. They are always talking about fairness. They are always talking about justice. Those are all moral arguments. So if we suddenly we abandon the moral argument, we give it up, we take that sword out of our scabbard, out of the sheath, and we throw it away, then we're handicapping ourselves. We're engaging our enemy with one hand tied behind our back, and they are perfectly willing to make a moral argument. They're always talking about equality and fairness and justice. Those are all moral issues, and they're building their case on the basis of these moral arguments, and we should have no hesitation in making a moral case for our point of view just as well. The reality is, we've said this before, but the reality is the only thing you can legislate is morality. That's all you can legislate, and it's clear from the way the left argues. They want marriage equality. That's what they say they're arguing for. Now, they already have it. We've made this point repeatedly. We believe in marriage equality. They've got it. They can get married just like anybody else can to one non-relative adult member of the opposite sex. That's absolute equality. Nobody's taken away their right to get married. It's preserved for them. They have equality, full, complete marriage equality right now in all 50 states. But what they want is inequality. That's what they want. They want inequality. They want a special carve-out for them that's not available to pedophiles and polygamists, and we need to call them on that. That's a moral argument. No, you don't want equality. You want special rights. You want inequality. You want to carve out for your kind of sexual behavior that you're not willing to give to people that are involved in pedophilia, people that are involved in incest, people that are involved in polygamy, or people that are involved in bestiality. You're not willing to give them the same carve-out that you want for yourself. There's nothing fair or equal about what you want whatsoever. So we make a moral argument in response. But we need to realize, look, they're arguing morality. Now, these are the people that say you can't legislate morality. They always say that, always throw that at us. But then they turn right around. The very people that say you can't legislate morality, these are the very people that turn right around and say you have to do this because it's right. You have to do this because this is equality. You have to do this because this is what fairness looks like. So what do? They legislate morality, and they are perfectly willing to impose that, their version of morality, on all 50 states. That's what they want the Supreme Court to do. They want the Supreme Court to impose their twisted view of morality when it comes to human sexuality on every single state in the Union. And they want the Supreme Court to silence all opposition. And that's going to happen. Charles Krauthammer talked about this. If the Supreme Court imposes same-sex marriage on the entire country, you are going to get one lawsuit after another. Every single institution, business, organization, religious group that believes in natural marriage and incorporates that concept into any of its policies, its personnel policies, its leadership policies, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the target of a lawsuit, a potentially business-ending, career-ending a lawsuit because they are perfectly willing to impose their morality on the rest of it, jam it down our throats, and if we don't like it, they're going to tell us to lump it and escort us to a jail cell to punish us for exercising our freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So my argument is we should not give up the moral argument for our position on marriage. We should not give up the moral argument when we're debating on same-sex marriage and should not just resort to social research. Now, let's grab clip number 4. Do we have time for clip 4, Rob? I think we. Okay. This is Representative Matt Salmon from Arizona, and he's a strong social conservative, and he's got a son who is gay. And he says here quite forthrightly, that has not changed my mind about the definition of marriage. Let's listen.
I don't support the gay marriage. My son is by far one of the most important people in my life. I love him more than I can say. I'm just not there as far as believing in my heart that we should change 2,000 years of social policy in favor of a redefinition of the family. I'm not there. I don't believe that this is a lifestyle that he chose. In fact, I remember him telling me at one point in time, he said, "Dad, do you truly believe that if I could have chosen a lifestyle, I would have chosen this with all the things that come along with it?" Doesn't mean that I don't have respect. It doesn't mean that I don't sympathize with some of the issues. It just means that I haven't evolved to that station. Rob Portman apparently has.
So that's Representative Matt Salmon, strong social conservative. He has a son who was an acknowledged homosexual. And I think Representative Salmon has even fallen for the lie that his son was born this way. Now, his son says, look, I have chosen this lifestyle. And so you can understand why they think they were born that way. They don't understand the forces that have shaped them and pushed them in that direction. But there are forces, environmental forces and other forces that have pushed them in that direction. But you know what we always say is sexual behavior is a matter of choice. We don't know why people experience the pull toward homosexuality. We can get some understanding of it from family dynamics and early sexual experiences and all that. But we don't understand all of why people have the sexual impulses they do. But we do know that people have a choice about which of those sexual impulses they yield. And I commend Representative Salmon. He says, look, I'm not going to change my mind about the definition of marriage. I love my son. I love my son more than my own life. But God has defined marriage. What God has defined, man may not redefine. Back in 2.